Hi, and welcome to session 4 of Building Referral Machine. Today's topic is making the introduction. So think about what's happened so far up to this point. We've made contact. We've actually inviting a conversation with our existing network. We've had the meeting with them. We've transferred the logic of triggering circumstances and witnesses. The person, very much regardless of what they thought prior to meeting you, they thought, wow, what a great idea. Of course, yes, I do need some of those folks. You agreed that some of these particular names even were really good connections, but certainly you agreed that somebody of that job description would be a great connection for them as a witness, and they were looking forward to it. You thought through about whether needed any coaching with the person you're going to introduce them to, and likely not. So let's just say that the vast majority, since they're going to be business to business or business development to business development, sales to sales type people, that's really the primary track we're going to spend time on today, that we're now prepared to actually make the introduction. Now this is going to be the simplest of all the modules because it's really about just doing it. We're going to provide a few rules and also a format that you're going to use in email on a routine basis. The rules, particularly in the vendor-to-vendor, the vast majority of times, are pretty simple. Let's not mess with them very much, though. So the witness logic has to be what binds the two people, vendor-to-vendor. That's the one thing that binds them, because you never want to put yourself in a position where one person is good for one, but they're not good for the other. So again, somebody's doing somebody a favor here, and that's not what we want. Now, that's the beauty of the witness logic, is that if they're a witness for one, or if one's a witness for the other, then by definition, they are in fact a witness for each other, right? So that both are getting the same thing out of it. So even the person that you've just now made them understand in this meeting here, that meeting this other person would be a great idea, you could go into your network and introduce someone in your network to them. You don't necessarily even have to coach that person. That person could actually be somebody who knows nothing about witnesses. See, you're the one that already knows that by definition they're good witnesses for each other. You don't even have to explain it to the other person in your network. Say this is a person that you just haven't talked to yet in reactivating your network. It doesn't matter. As long as you know that the witness logic is what binds them, they will be good for each other and nobody's doing somebody a favor. Okay, so this is very, very, very important. Email is going to be the best method. You're going to address it to both people, and you're going to put the contact information for both people on there. There's a certain amount of somebody not knowing who's supposed to call who, and they both take responsibility for making the connection. And you're saying that you're mutually benefiting. You should mutually take the effort to make the connection. Now, you're going to, in your coaching of one, if you choose to do it, or if you're both vendor folks, they're going to make the connection. I mean, they're both going to respond, because that's what they do, okay? So that's not much of a concern. Make sure that the invitation of any sort is going to be very colloquial, very casual, and by definition, it should reflect the fact that it's very informal. It can be humorous, but it's going to reflect the fact you know each other, right? So you want that familiarity, that closeness to be reflected. Sometimes people will get a letter of introduction, particularly a vendor being introduced to a target, that someone will say, well, you got to give me some information as to why you should do that. And what they create is like this formal business letter that's got all this marketing speak in it. It's terrible. And sometimes they'll do this. Here's for my client. I would like to introduce, my client says they're going to introduce me to some of their peers elsewhere. Fantastic. So what I do is I give the client then this whole marketing speak formal letter, and then when the client sends it to their peers, everybody knows the vendor wrote it, because it doesn't sound anything like the guy who's making the introduction. Okay? That isn't how he talks. That's not how I know him. It's not familiar, right? This is obviously something that was given to him by a vendor, and he's just doing the vendor a favor, right? Yeah, that doesn't really bode well for you. Doesn't make a good case. So that's why we want to make sure that it is familiar and colloquial, showing that it is me thinking it's a good idea for you. It's going to be networking based in the case of vendor to vendor in almost all cases. And if you've got other common ground, great. If it turns out they've got some similar hobbies, similar interests, or dealing with some similar issues, then that's just great. The only issue is that's a problem is if they're competitors. And so I think it goes without saying that you don't have to introduce competitors to each other, because that's not going to happen. All right? So maybe that should be a rule, but I think it goes without saying. I think you've not been doing that anyway. The interesting thing we're going to do is we're going to try to make 3 intros. And for those of you who think that I don't have enough to even do one, we're going to address that in a minute. It's just not true. So you want to try to do 3. And you don't want to do them all at one time. Now you want to take the effort for your own efficiency to go through the list and say, okay, here's one, and I'm going to boilerplate this. I'm just going to change the names and just boilerplate these emails. And I'm going to do 3 because I'm going to go think through my list one time. And I'll just cut and paste it or make a boilerplate, and I'll do cut and paste 3 times. Now, I'm not going to send them out though all at the same time. What you want to do is if you're in Outlook, and if you can get this feature to work routinely, properly, good luck. But if you can get delayed delivery to work all the time, you can do that and separate out the delayed deliveries by about 1 or 2 days. So maybe every 3rd day, every 2nd, 3rd, 4th day, they're getting an introduction, one of these 3 from you, okay? Or you could just save them in drafts in any email system and just have them saved. And then just every couple of days, go back and just launch a few of those things, a few of those drafts. So make it easy for yourself, but try to space them out. So do you have any idea why I'm saying you should do that? There's a big difference in the psychological message that's being sent, right? The impact it has on the other person. See, if the person sees the invite, so first of all, you've gone through this process and you're actually going to take action. Remember, this is a 5% behavior. They're not used to this happening. So you're a very special human being. You made it all about them, which is a special human being all by themselves, and you actually followed through on a 5% behavior. Okay? Just based on this conversation alone. Now, that makes you very special in their eyes, and it's kind of surprising. So they're pleasantly surprised that you came through with it. Now, if it turns out that 2 or 3 days later another one happens, well, they're even that much more surprised. So if you did it all at once, there might be a shock and awe sort of thing, but there's not a lot of incremental benefit you're getting by the number 2 and number 3 if they're just 3 of them in a row. Plus, we're sending another message by sending it 3 days later, 5 days later is the 3rd one, is that you're sending the message that you're always thinking about them, because that's one of the issues we're dealing with, right? We want to make sure that they realize we want them to always be thinking about us when they reciprocate. So one of the things that we're demonstrating here is what it's like when somebody's thinking of you all the time. When they get the 3rd one, they're thinking, my God, I have people that, my mother doesn't send me this many. I've got people in my own company that aren't thinking of me as much as this person is. Okay, very important message for them to get. So that's one of the reasons why we try to do this days apart. Okay. So what we're doing, and let's not lose sight of that, the whole purpose of this 5% behavior is to really give somebody the opportunity to now demonstrate whether they have the reciprocity gene or not. This forces them to reveal that. You know that everybody's going to be greatly appreciative. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. It was wonderful. I can't believe you did this. It's great connection. It was a wonderful person. Okay, they'll get that 100% of the time because it's a 5% behavior. It's precious. Now, but you'll find that, whatever it is, half the time, something like that, and you really can't tell by talking to people. You'll be surprised who's a reciprocator, who isn't. But you don't really know for sure until you put them in the situation. And they come back to you and say, this is incredible. There must be something I can do for you. Tell me, who can I introduce you to? I don't know if I have somebody, but what can I do? And of course, that's when we will spend a little time on helping others help you. But all we're doing all the way up to this point is to identify, to do the 5% behavior, to identify who has a reciprocity gene that will actually do the 5% behavior back. Okay? So this is what we're trying to get done. This idea of not having enough witnesses. Now this is a lot of you are going to think this at this point. So think about this scenario. If you go to, and there's people, I've done this as a kid, there's other people that do this today, they're clients. Say you go to a city and you don't know anybody there. You've been transferred there and you have to do business development in the city. Now most people would never do that. So people are opening a remote office. They'll always hire somebody in the local community thinking that it's so important that they're connected in the local community. And this is one of the most common frustrations people have, right? Because here are my options. I'm opening another office. Say I'm going to open an office in Denver, and we're not in Denver. So I can say, well, I'm going to pick somebody that I know, trust, tried and true in our company, certainly knows how we work. We know how they work. We know they're credible, they're experienced. The only thing they're missing, assuming we can get them to move, the only thing they're missing is that they have no contacts in Denver. So people will almost always opt to hire somebody in Denver, yet I don't know anything about their capabilities, right? They're not proven to me. They don't know our company. They don't know our products, service offerings, not a proven entity. And even worse, I'm going to try to manage them remotely. Okay, so, but people will do that because they put so much value in the fact that they've got to have a local network. Well, using a referral machine, I have clients that say, forget that. What I can do is I can take someone who's a total stranger to that city, I can move them out there, and in 6 months' time, they'll know 500 people that are the right 500 people that will determine the destiny of this office. And the interesting thing is that you hire somebody that is from that community. It's amazing how difficult, because they don't understand the referral machine, how difficult it is for that person to monetize their relationships. And remember what their network is. Beautiful network, 5% active, 95% inactive. This is what you're hiring. So this is a very interesting way to have to rethink a lot of things here. So I bring this up now. So you say you have this attitude. So this is what somebody would do that had no network in the other city. They would just need one person to set up a meeting. So that's somebody they know here. They can say, who do you know in Denver that meets the witness criteria, right? And they'll have a network here. They'll say, yeah, I know 2 or 3 or 4 people in Denver that would meet that witness criteria. So you get introductions to them saying, I'm coming out to Denver, would love to be able to get your insights about Denver and the fact I'm opening an office there. People are like, hey, glad to help. So here's what you can do. You can go set up an 8 o'clock breakfast meeting. Again, if they're bound by this witness connection, right? We have a witness logic that binds us. You meet somebody for breakfast, then you have coffee with somebody else at 10, then you have lunch with another person at 12, another coffee at 2, cocktails at 4. Okay, let's say that's 100% of what you know about that town. See, when you meet the person for breakfast, and then you meet the person for coffee at 10, those two, by 11 o'clock or by that evening, you can introduce those two. Because the witness logic binds you, therefore that binds them as well. If every one of the people I meet's a witness, in the rare cases where they're competitors, that everyone's a witness for each other and of great value to each other. So I can introduce, when I meet the person at lunch, I can introduce that person to the person I met for breakfast and 10 o'clock coffee, person I met at 2, now I have 3 people to introduce them to. So frankly, to be able to do this intro, you can just have 3 meetings where you didn't fall off the wagon and didn't do it the right way, right? So they are in fact bound by the witness logic. Then you can make 3 meetings and you're off to the races, because you can't really wear them out. So think about that. So think about somebody in a business development world, a market-facing person who understands now the value of these witnesses you're sending to them to grow their network, and you can send them 10 connectors. So say you know 5 people and you meet 50 people over the next month. You're the new person in that town. You meet 50 people in that over the next month. That it turns out that you can only introduce them to the original 5. So those 5 each get 10. Are they going to call you up and be upset? If every one of them is in fact bound by this logic, they're going to see the value in every one of them. In fact, they're going to think, who are you? You must be the most connected person in town. You've been there a month, you know 50 people. It's just that this behavior is only done by magnanimous people, you know, that they're out to help other people and they're highly connected. That's the only time they've ever seen this behavior take place from someone. So that must be you. So another one of those attributes they'll assign to you, other than being a wonderful, generous person who's trying to make a difference in other people's lives. So So get over this. If you start thinking this, my biggest fear is that you're going to psych yourself out, because we talked about how you got to have a certain lens to see your contacts. It takes about 3 or 4 sets of introductions before all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I know tons of people I can introduce people to. It takes a while for you to think this thing through. You'll actually never get there if you're starting off in this position that I don't know anybody. So that's why I tell the story that frankly you need to know very few people. If you're just coming out of college and your network is very small, what's probably the bigger issue with your network is actually of peers. It's a bunch of other people that are just out of college that have small networks. So that's your bigger issue. But even from there, you can start getting introductions of people that are more connected. It just grows very, very quickly. It's just geometric how quickly it grows. It just becomes really a question of how much time do you have on your calendar to be able to meet folks, which is why in the efficiency discussion we'll talk about ways that you really need to become much more efficient, and you'll soon be doing half-hour phone calls back to back on a Friday morning, you know, from 8 to 11. and you'll be able to do a ton of those kinds of meetings. Effectively, what you're doing is this meeting on the phone. Okay, now you won't do that all the time, but many of the times. Now, vendor to target, we talked in the coaching of your connections, is that the stronger why is really required in both those cases, and really those are custom introductions based on custom sets of circumstances and insights you have about those individuals, and you really want to get the aid of Trojan horses in cases like that. Okay, so here's the script that you're going to use. You're going to say two people, right? Bob, Sally, hope all is well with both of you. I was thinking of you two recently, and based on our recent conversations, I realized that a connection between the two of you would be very complementary and useful in your business efforts. So that's a fairly universal statement that you'll use. There's a couple variations below here, depending on whether it's really 100% vendor to vendor, or whether it's potentially a target element to it, targets to targets, for example. So we'll just use number one, we'll skip to. You both work with similar people. There's the witness connection, by the way. You work with similar people, are well connected in similar circles. More importantly, you've been very useful to me and others by sharing your connections and your resources. So you're basically saying that you guys have a lot in common. You're basically witnesses for each other because you call in the same kind of folks, and you have a lot of the same kind of people that are useful in your network, and also you're a giver kind of person. You're somebody that connects people. So this is all going to be consistent with what you're going to be suggesting to anybody when you talk to them. I've included contact information for each of you below. Please consider contacting each other as soon as possible, as I know something good will come from your discussions. Please let me know if there's anything else I can do to make this connection happen. Keep me posted however you sign off. Now, another option is that you replace one with two, and it takes a slightly different bend in the road here. You got these two things that are the same. You kind of turn a little different direction here. You both have common, not work with similar people, connected to similar kinds of clients or resources. That's not what they're interested in, right? These are more internal facing folks. Now, you both have common interests and backgrounds, and you're pursuing similar initiatives like whatever it is. Migration of this, looking for private equity folks and acquisitions, integrating an acquisition, whatever it is that would be some of the examples we've used in the past. You'll have a one-liner at maximum describing that initiative. I believe there's a lot you can share to be helpful to each other. It wouldn't surprise me if you knew many people in common. So the networking thing is pretty much a secondary issue here, but I'm still touching on it. It wouldn't surprise me if you knew a lot of people in common. Okay, that's a positive. It's not the main reason. And then you can close it off in the same way. Now, what we don't want is we don't want one that's much longer than this. That's the key. You want it to be brief. If it requires a lot more messaging, then that probably falls into the coaching your connections category, where you may have to reach out to one of them and talk to them about this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to send this really basic thing here, but I want you to go ahead and make contact, but I want you to understand this about them. You know, I had an example of a case where I have a vendor and a target scenario. Many years ago, every time I move someplace, I always feel that you have to have a wholesale car connection, and for buying vehicles, one of my hobbies. So I have this wholesale car guy, and I would meet folks and say, hey, listen, anytime either you're buying a nice vehicle for yourself, your spouse, or a kid at college or something, and you want a little beater, whatever the case is, you should have a wholesale connection for something. So if you get a 1 or 2 year old luxury vehicle that's $65,000, 1 or 2 years old, it's $10,000 or $15,000 less in a wholesale market, that's actually a pretty good thing. So people say, yeah, that would be great. Would love to be able to have someone like that on my Rolodex. So I had this car guy. Now the car guy is a car guy, right? So what do car people do? It's like a genetic thing, right? This guy's programmed to sell. He just sell all the time as a wholesaler. So I call him up and say, so listen, I'm going to introduce you to a bunch of people who write checks for $65,000, $80,000 cars routinely, okay? You don't have to worry about financing, which he doesn't offer. So, it's one of the rules, right? You got to have your own financing or you don't need it. So I said, I know a ton of people like that. I'm going to start introducing you to people like that. And that's how I'm going to do it. Send you this emails like this. Now, this is vendor to target, right? The harder one. So I tell them, I have to coach them. I have to tell them, listen, none of these people are prospects for you immediately. So none of them that I'm going to send to you are people that have told me they're looking for a car. But you know, you and I both know that someday they will. The only thing they've said is that they'd be interested in knowing how the process works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you, and you're just going to explain to them that should the occasion arise, these would be the circumstances by which we can do business. Okay, things like you got to have your own financing, that sort of thing. Now I'm going to talk to all of them, and if any of them say you tried to sell them something, I'm going to stop. No more introductions. Okay? So that was the coaching that I did. So the coupon, right, is the fact that this guy's a wholesaler that has a retail license that most people don't have access to. So he, by himself as a resource, is his own Trojan horse for me. So I introduced him to 300-400 people over a period of a few years. And I could call him up now and say, okay, here, new program. From now on, you can only talk to people between 1 and 2 in the afternoon, and you can only do it in your pajamas. He would do it, right? He'll take the coaching at 200 or 300 people. The guy's making a ton of money off of wholesaling luxury cars to executives and people that can afford them. So the idea is that you want to make it brief, but I had to have that explanation with him. But my introductions were extremely brief. You know, here's the wholesaler person I mentioned, thought you might be interested in the future. Should you ever want to get a car, this could be one of your options. Probably a good guy to have in the Rolodex. Bingo, that's all I had to do. Nothing else. I had to coach him one time though. That's it. And then after that, he always behaved properly. Just told him, here's the situation. Now, it turned out most of the people that I gave him, in fact, were looking for a vehicle. That's how it came up. They were saying, you know, I understand you have this wholesaler guy. I'm thinking about buying a car. What do you think? Now, I knew that was the reason why most of the people would bring it up, but in my coaching, I told him, none of them are prospects. So he wouldn't sell. Now, when the person said, well, that's interesting, you know, I think I'd like to take you up. I'm actually looking for a car now. Pleasant surprise. And they didn't have to listen to a sales pitch from him in the interim, him trying to convince them. All right, so that was my coaching. Don't sell in his particular case. So on the other hand, introduction was brief. Now, another aspect of introduction that I want to make sure we're clear about. Now, people who are enthusiastic about you would like to introduce you to folks, particularly if it's a potential that this person could be a target, because there's an overlap in many cases. A lot of people in business development mode could actually buy your service, depending on what kind of service it is. I mean, think about what my company offers. We offer sales training to companies and to individuals. So who is it that buys that? Well, it's often the same people that would be in the network, right? So in my case, it's the same people. So you never know what the depending on what you do, what the real underlying circumstances are. So what I want to make sure though is that if in fact the person in a vendor-to-vendor environment or vendor-to-target, that if the vendor-to-vendor environment is somebody who could potentially buy from you, there's going to be a tendency for your person who's making the introduction to want to sell you. So you're not going to be doing that. There's no selling here, right? I'm not selling the person on what they do. So I don't mention what they do. I mention that they've got a large network in the similar circles and they're generous about sharing their contacts. That's all I've mentioned. They can have any job description and it won't show up here. So we have to avoid people wanting to do that for you. So you're not going to make the mistake. So here's an example. So there was a law firm that where all of the partners wanted to be trained in this kind of networking, so they don't have to do the conventional type networking. And it was also in the trust and influence, which is particularly important for professional services, the trust and influence program. Now they were starting to get some benefits, and I was starting to introduce this to them. And so they're all excited about this opportunity. I go in and we're starting to talk about this building referral machine, and the managing partner says, Gene, here's what I can do for you. He saw this format. Now he's been familiar with it because he's seen it before. I've introduced him to folks, other people that are clients of ours. He knows them and he's seen this format. So this was new to him. And we're starting the referral machine, and he says, oh, I've seen some of the stuff that you do for the introductions, and I have an improvement that I'd like to offer you. And he asked for his assistant to bring in the improvement. So it was this particular format, and he inserted a paragraph here that said, oh, and we've engaged Gene's company, and it's been a great help to us. It's made a big difference, and I'm very excited to introduce him to you. So all he did was just add something which he thought was great, because what he was doing, he was making an endorsement, right? Something that we all wish we had more of. And so he was volunteering as, here, I'm prepared to not only do this, Gene, I'm prepared to throw in there the fact that I've actually hired you and your company, and we've had great results, right? We're all excited about it. So he said, so I just want you to know I'm prepared to do that, to add that to the introductions as an improvement. Now you can change, if there's anything you want to do to change that, edit that sentence, change the words. I know you're pretty particular about the psychology, so whatever changes you want to make, please do it, is what he offered. And I said, I'm so grateful that you'd be willing to do that for me. There is an edit I'd like to make, a simple one though. All I would like to do is just to take that sentence that you put in there, and if you could just take that out. And he thought, well, how could that be better? I says, well, what we're doing here is that you've inadvertently, in an effort to try to say a good thing and help me out, that you've telegraphed the fact that this is potentially a sales call. So these people could potentially be clients or prospects, but they're not going to want to meet with me because the basis appears to be really, you've exposed some hidden underlying agenda here, and that my motives are to try to sell them sales training. So they won't take the call. They won't accept this meeting. And he said, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, that's right. So what we're doing here is that vendor to vendor, we're making it based on the fact that this person's good connections for them. We're not making it based on what they do for a living. Now, the only time that I've ever would recommending that, well, this is what the person does. Now, they're going to see that in the signature block here, where you're going to be putting down the company name, that sort of thing. People will figure it out, or they'll Google them, or they'll LinkedIn them, and and they'll find out a little bit about their background. But the only reason you ever mention here is if it's a justification for why they have a killer network, or it's validation that they work with the same people. So he works for the software company that only sells extensions to finance applications for these kind of companies. So it's just a validation that yes, in fact, that we're very complementary in what we do, and we call on the same people. But it's actually unnecessary to say that. Now, in the case where there's another, in addition to that, you can say, and besides, you guys have a lot of things in common, like one sentence. If you want to add more to networking, you can add some kind of common interest or background, initiative. You can always add that as optional. For a target, probably a must. You need a little bit, again, more why I should meet with the person. So you can add another sentence like that. Okay, so that's it. We don't want to make it any longer than this, though. Again, people just have too short attention spans these days. They just don't want to see an email that's got that much text on it. They may even choose to read it later. What we don't is we don't want them to do that. We read it right now. Okay, so it needs to be something that looks like I can deal with this thing in the next 20, 30 seconds. Okay, that's what we want to do. So that's really it. It's important to start getting this going. The summary is, the purpose of this was to complete that demonstration of a 5% behavior, so that people will see and put us, if they have the reciprocity gene, they will put us in their 5%. So this is what we're trying to do something good for them. This is an interesting thing now. What happens if they don't have the reciprocity gene? And we've just invested in 3 introductions. Well, first of all, that was free. Okay, it took you 10 minutes because these are cut and paste. You can do this. You don't have to be paying attention. You don't have to be on your best behavior wearing a suit at a networking meeting. You can be watching your favorite TV show, watch a sitcom, sit there in your pajamas with your laptop. You can do this. Okay, most of it's going to be boilerplate. Now, you are adding value to their life, and you're giving them some introduction. Turns out they don't have reciprocity gene, so what's going to happen here is they're going to be grateful. They're going to say, they're going to do nothing else for you. However, if they're ever in a conversation with anybody who says, well, do you know Gene? Oh yeah, no, I've met Gene before. Oh yeah, great guy. So that's the worst that's going to happen, is you're going to have 3 or 4 people on a table say, oh yeah, no, great guy, because I made a meeting all about them, and I did something to add value in their life. They did nothing but show gratitude back to me, which is fine. Now, I haven't invested that much more effort into their life and their business because they've demonstrated they don't have that reciprocity gene. But anytime my name is brought up, they say good things. I could have 5 people around the table, 3 people say, what a wonderful guy. The other 2 people don't know me. All of a sudden, they want to know. right? They want to know who I am. So that's the worst that's going to happen. So that's really what the benefit is that I want to accrue to you. Now, no selling, as I mentioned, that one sentence in there that a client was prepared to put in there. Oh, we've used his company and it's made a big difference. Well, he's starting to sell. I don't want them to start selling what I get paid for. As soon as you start, they can sell me on other attributes of me, like a Trojan horse or my ability to provide a lot of connections to them, potentially provide referrals to them. Okay, that's great benefit to them. It's not what I do for a living. Once you introduce what I do for a living, now they start thinking, red flag, this guy is looking for a sales call. Frankly, I'm not up for that. I see what he does for a living. Yeah, I'm not interested in that. That's a whole path that we didn't want him to go down. That's not the whole purpose of this conversation. Now, when I'm talking to him, if it turns out they're a potential prospect, well, we can figure that out when I'm talking to him, but I've got to get him to accept the meeting first, right? Yeah, if you have far more witnesses than you think, and I use the example, if you had none, and you met one in the morning, one at 10 o'clock, by noon you have 2 people you can introduce that person to. Vendor to target introductions, customized based on things like common interests, common circumstances, initiatives, etc. And once again, just have to do this thing so that you can just start getting through the knothole of this mindset. So really the preparation is you just need to start doing this. By this time you have no excuse not to be having those meetings, because now you can make those introductions. And while you're in the process of doing that, you can see the next couple of modules that are much simpler, much easier. This completes one logical segment though, which is to invite the introduction, meet with them, and complete it with, or invite the meeting, meet with them, and then ultimately provide the 5% behavior, so that now we can now put it in their court. Let me see if they have the reciprocity gene, and they come back to me beyond gratitude, but say, my God, this was fantastic. What can I do for you? Another interesting dynamic is you will start to introduce people to other people that will be doing what you're doing. So by example, people in your network will start saying, God, this is great what you're doing. This is fantastic. What can I do to be more part of this? And you're telling them, just do the same thing I'm doing. Now, the interesting thing is that you meet somebody new, you're going to introduce them to 3 people. You want the 3 people to be people that do what we do, right? The 3 people will then meet with the person, find out who's a good connection for them, introduce them to more. So in my case, I've always introduced them to people who've been through this program, so that someone meets me, they meet 3 people. I meet each of the 3 people, introduce them to 3 more people. So now that's 9 people on top of the initial me and the other first 3. And then those people, it's a cascading, highly geometric event for these people. In a matter of 30 days, 40 days, they're meeting 29, 30, 40 people from the introduction to me, because each person I'm introducing them to is introducing them to a bunch of other folks that meet the witness criteria. And what they're doing is they're calling back the original person that introduced me to them, saying, my God, thank you so much. Where'd you find these people? Once I met Gene, introduced me to these people, it's like a whole vein of people that just are so generous, and they're so connected, and they're so introduced me to such good people. Right? It all gets accrued to you because you started that. So over time, you'll start to see that there's going to be people emulating what you do in your network, your closest 5%, which will end up being 25% of your network as you train them to do it this way. Anyway, so I'm rambling on here. Enough of that. So I will let you get to work here making those introductions, and then in the next couple sections we'll talk about how is it you help them help you and receive introductions, and how you can be more efficient at handling the volume of what's about to happen here for you. Okay, so I'm excited for you. Good luck. See you at the next session. Bye-bye.